is scheduled to meet with congressional leaders from both sides on Tuesday. So is there anything he can do to avoid this standoff? Karen Hanretty is a former communications director for the Republican National Congressional Committee, and Jake Berliner, deputy policy director for the center-left D.C. think tank NDN. Karen and Jake, welcome this morning.
Thank you.
Karen, let me start with you. What do you think is going to happen?
I think I don't think a lot is going to happen at this meeting on Tuesday. I think the real deal-making, if you want to call it that, is going to happen behind the scenes between Republicans, the new Republican leadership, and moderate Democrats. There are a lot of Democrats out there who I believe do not want to see tax increases before the end of the year. So I tend to think that that's where the real deal-making is going to happen, and not with the president.
Jake, do you think that there are enough Democrats to join with the Republicans to keep this going?
Well, I think you'll see Democrats really adamant about extending tax cuts for 98% of Americans. And really the disagreement exists over what to do about the tax cuts for the top 2% of Americans. And so I think you'll see Democrats holding pretty firm that their priority is really making sure the vast majority of Americans see the tax cuts extended. And I think the president and Republicans and Democrats will be able to work together to achieve that much.
You know what I don't understand, and this is you're talking about the 250,000 or below, that the top 2% or 250,000 and above. But look at some of the figures from Deloitte tax. They say if these Bush tax cuts expire, it's going to hit almost everybody. That if you're a couple and you make $50,000, your taxes are going up almost $3,000. If you make $150,000 and you're a couple, your taxes are going up almost $5,000. Help me out with this. I mean, this isn't what we're told by the folks from Washington, Jake or Karen. I mean, that this could affect a lot more people than just those the richies.
Look, if the Democrats do not, if the Democrats do not concede to extending the current tax rates for at least another year to 2 years, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Look, it doesn't have to be permanent for all time immemorial. I mean, just do it for another year to 2 years. Then you will not see tax increases across the board. And I think that's where Republicans are going to stand. Look, we need millionaires and above. We need them creating jobs also. We need them pouring money into the economy, not paying more money to the federal government for it to spend. And I think that's the bottom line here.
Jay, do you think that's the bottom line? I mean, it seems like it's going to hit a lot of people.
Well, this argument that you've heard from Karen, that millionaires and above, giving them these huge $100,000 tax breaks, that this is how we create jobs in this economy, is an argument we've heard for the last decade, when in reality over the last 10 years, the middle class and average Americans have seen household incomes decline. So what Karen is telling you are economics that just don't work. There's no basis in reality, and the American people know that. The American people overwhelmingly want the tax cuts extended for 98% of Americans, and for millionaires to have their tax cuts expire. So both the economics and the polling is on the side of the Democrats on this one, which is why I think they'll hold strong and why I think they'll do well.
Karen,
see, here's what I never understand, and I'd love to hear the Democrats explain this. Why everything with taxes is a zero-sum game. In other words, if you keep the tax rates as they are currently for couples earning $250,000 and above, including millionaires, if you increase their taxes, how somehow that helps the middle class. They turn it into this zero-sum game, which there's no great basis in economics for. That what you want in a stagnant economy like this is more people holding on to more of their money, spending more of their money, and not sending it to the federal government, because the government is simply going to spend more of that money. And that's something else that voters are tired of, is an expansion of spending by the federal government. Give them more money and they'll spend it.
And Jake, last word, I mean, we just had an election, and look, the overwhelming message from the Americans was for a lot of people, the Tea Party calls to cut spending, cut taxes, and cut the deficit.
Well, right. So let's think about the promise that Republicans made in this election, that they were going to cut taxes and cut the deficit. Well, of course, you can't do both at the same time. So if you want to cut taxes, well, on the table from the Republicans is a $700 billion tax cut for the wealthiest Americans. That increases the deficit dramatically. So what you're going to have to see is Republicans making good on the central promise of the last election, which is to somehow both cut deficits and cut taxes, which you can't do at the same time. This deficit commission is having its report come out in the next weeks. You will see very clearly that you cannot cut taxes and cut the deficit and have this all work out like magic. So I hope Karen and the Republicans have some recipe for this to work, but the fact is the numbers just don't add up.
They're going to start sitting down on Tuesday to deal with this. The president will see if there will be a compromise or if the taxes will keep on going up. Karen Hanretty and Jake Berliner, thanks for joining us this morning. Jamie?
Thank you.
The U.S. has gone into damage control as government